Hey friends, so for today's video, I was thinking I could write about the ebooks that I'm working on and the process of how I put them together and what it's like. So I wrote my first ebook in last year. I released it in March of last year. It's called Friendly Ambitious Nerd. It's sold about 1,000 copies so far, and that was moderately challenging to write. I would say, okay, the hard thing about Friendly Ambitious Nerd was not writing it so much as it was conceptualizing it, because I have a lot of material lying around from a lot of stuff that I've done, and the challenge was figuring out how was I going to frame it so that it kind of fits. It's like framing a shot. It's like taking a photograph in a sense, like deciding where should I focus the audience's attention on, my attention on, right? What path should I bring people through the city of thoughts and ideas that I have? And I did a whole bunch of brainstorming and trial and erroring and talking to people and trial and erroring, trial and error, trialing and error, trial and erroring. Did a bunch of trial and error. Right, the process is named the same thing as the thing. I did a bunch of trial and error and brainstorming, and in the end I came up with Friendly Ambitious Nerd, wrote it, pieced it together from a bunch of other stuff I'd written, did a little bit of editing, not as much as I would have liked, not to my satisfaction, but good enough to I feel to be worth publishing. So I published it, version 1.0, and it's been doing pretty well so far, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm not super happy with it yet though, so I haven't done like serious marketing for it, because I feel that before I kind of really sell it, I should make sure that I'm ecstatically happy with it. I when I post online, when I post on Twitter, when I'm talking on YouTube even, I want to make sure that if I'm selling something to people, if I'm like pitching something to people, I personally think it is so great that I wish someone would have pitched it to me. With regards to Friendly Ambitious Nerd as a book, that's kind of complicated, because these are ideas that did change my life, but I'm already familiar with them, so they won't change my life again, in a sense, right? Um, so that's complicated. But I do know that I have an idea of what I think would be great, and it's not quite there yet. And maybe once I reach the next level, I'm gonna release an update v1.1. I already have the material, or the scope of the material, that I feel was missing in the first one. In the first book I wrote a lot about friendship, but not as much about ambition and nerding, and I'm gonna flesh out those kind of missing gaps. And then a bunch of editing, that it's kind of disjointed. I think it can be more elegant and kind of flow better and stuff like that. I'm gonna fix that in the next version. And then after that I might still have additional things that I want to do, but that's the thing about project management and figuring out version, like what each I experience this when I'm cleaning my windows. It's like, first, when you first clean your when you first look at your window and you haven't cleaned it in a long time, it's dirty, and so you can't even see through the other side properly. No, what I'm trying to say is, when you do your first kind of wipe to clean one side of a window, because there's more clarity on one side, you can now see some of the marks and stains and whatnot on the other side more clearly. And then once you clear that, you may notice some stains on the first side that you didn't catch the first time, because it wasn't clear enough. And I think that's really what repeatedly editing a piece of work can be like. And at the same time, I'm sympathetic to this idea. I think from Anais Nin said something like this. She said, you shouldn't try to repeatedly edit a piece of work, because then it kind of, you choke the life out of it. She says rather you should just keep rewriting the whole thing from scratch. She's talking about essays and like diary entries, so it's not about books. But she said, try rewriting the whole thing from scratch with like passion and with flow, because then you get there's a certain spirit that you get from that process, that you can't quite chop it up and chunk it, and then when you do the chopping and chunking thing, you end up getting a kind of Frankenstein's monster, and what you really want is to keep going so that you have that flow. Okay, that's Friendly Ambitious Nerd. The book that I'm working on right now is called Introspect. Introspect is, so there's a whole journey here where I have changed my concept of what introspect is several times, And I think how I would describe it now is that it is the book that is grows out of the DMs that I've received and the conversations that I've had with people who come to my DMs asking for help. So basically every few days or so I get some DMs from some people asking me to help them. It's usually young men, sometimes women, who are struggling with something or another. And the world has no shortage of literature of self-help or guidance or whatever, but these people keep coming to me because evidently they see something about me and the way I conduct myself and the way whatever my worldview is or whatever, and they're looking to hear from someone like me. And so not to be presumptuous and to claim that I have the answer to how to be for everybody, but I've kind of figured myself out, and there is a subset of people who feel that they should reach out to me because they feel like they are more like me than other people, I guess, or than whatever the mainstream options are. And I feel like that was true for me as well. When I was a teenager and I was a young adult in my 20s, I struggled to put myself together in the way that I wanted, despite all the literature that I've encountered in the world about this sort of thing. And so, introspect is at the kind of heart of it and at the surface of it, just in every sense, I guess. It's supposed to be a book about how I figured myself out and the conversations that I've had with people and what their struggles have been. And I fell into a bit of a trap writing this book because there's a bunch of reasons why. I think it's like the sophomore slump where after you've written one book or you've produced one movie or whatever, you feel like your second work has to outdo your first work in some way, or you have these expectations, or you have all these plans, and all of that is just not helpful. It just kind of screws you over. And yeah, I got kind of high modernist about it. I got kind of top down. I made a plan for all of the things that I wanted to include in the book and how I wanted it to be perfect in certain ways. And then I just kind of got myself stretched thin in some ways. I got myself twisted up in some ways. And after a whole bunch of struggle and frustration and procrastination, it slowly dawned on me that I should get back to what the heart of the book is, and that is the conversations that I've had with people that they have said is really helpful. So even if actually come to think of it, I could do the same thing that I did with Friendly Ambitious Nerd, where I pretty much pull out whatever I know has worked and just dump it on the page with minimal editing, and then that's that. But I also want to become better as a writer, and I want to get more. I think there is a kind of book writing skill that doesn't get activated when you're writing Twitter threads or blog posts. It's the skill of assembling information in a way for like a large continuous reading experience, and that is something that I want to get good at. So it's something I want to work on, and so I am going to introduce some of that. But so super broadly, what I've come to realize is that introspect is really about inner narrative troubleshooting. What I mean by that is, you know it's storytelling skills, right? The problem that a lot of people have, that when they come to me and they ask me for help, is that they are not satisfied with the story that they have of themselves. Either it's a bad story, or the story that they have in their head doesn't match up to the story of to what their lived experience is like and what their day-to-day reality is like, and they struggle to navigate that gap between what they think their life is and what they think they would like it to be. And in some cases, both of those things are entirely or largely hallucinated, and they need to kind of return to earth in a sense, but not so harshly that it overwhelms them with despair and dread, which is a thing that will happen, I think, as you undertake any of these sort of journeys. So that's broadly what introspect is about. I had this flash of insight, which is kind of a obvious in retrospect kind of thing, which is that I should model the phases of the personal psychological journey to it should map quite nicely to a conventional hero's journey in storytelling. Like there's the call to adventure, and then there's the supernatural aid, and then there's the belly of the beast, the death and rebirth, and then returning to society and sharing the elixir. Like there's that path of self-knowledge, and the belly of the beast in the path to self-knowledge, I think, is coming to terms with like yourself and your image of yourself and your self-loathing and your narcissism, right? Your self-obsession, your fear, like all of those things. There's something there about how to navigate that in a way that is skillful, measured, um, kind, and yeah. So I'm trying to work all of that into the book, and I'm hoping to be done this month. And let me know if you have any questions about writing a book, about writing in general, about editing. I don't know, whatever. Just let me know what you want to hear me talk about in the comments, and I'll see you around. Done.